All right, everybody, welcome to our online Friday lecture. To start with, let's just talk about what we looked at on Wednesday. So our main thing on Wednesday was our subatomic particles. So sorry, just going back here. So protons, neutrons, electrons, protons positive, electrons negative. Protons and neutrons weigh the same. Then we looked at nuclear theory and some questions about nuclear theory. We looked at isotope notation. So there are two ways to talk about isotopes. Remember, isotopes have the same number of protons, but different number of neutrons. Had some questions with that. Then we talked about ions. Ions are molecules with the same number of protons, but different number of electrons. You have your cations, which means you lose electrons, and your anions, which mean you gain electrons. Remember, for this, electrons are negative. They are -1. So if I lose electrons, I become positive. If I gain electrons, I become negative. And then the last thing that we did is we started to fill out this table. We did the first two rows, but we will continue. So let me get my periodic table. That is another tab. So we have calcium. We go to our periodic table and we see calcium is element 20. So that means there are 20 protons. If it's +2, we have more protons and electrons, 18, right? Because -1 + 1. Beryllium, the symbol is Be. If it's +2 and it has 2 electrons already, it must have 4 protons to make that math work. Cl-, the symbol would be Cl. And it has more electrons than protons, 1 more electron. So if it has 17 protons, it has 18 electrons. And then last, we have an element with 11 protons. We go to our periodic table. Sodium is element 11. So that would be our symbol, sodium. We have 1 more proton than electron, so it is sodium plus. So that's the end of that table. What we are going to look at today are some periodic table trends. And for this video, when I have questions like we do in class, pause the video and try them before continuing on to see the answer. All right, so I'm going to clear this out. Go back to my big view and then continue on. All right. So here we have our periodic table, and what our goal right now is to learn some groups of the periodic table and what charges the atoms in those groups will adopt when they go through a reaction. So first off, just the big division of the periodic table. Everything in the brownish color or the left side of the periodic table are your metals. Everything on the right side are your nonmetals. And then in the middle purple, we have our metalloids. All right. So to find the metalloids, not every periodic table will be colored. Some periodic tables have this dark ladder as a way for you to find your metalloids. You can also just remember it starts with boron. And at boron, just do a diagonal down. And then you just have to add Ge and Sb. So the metalloids are half metal, half non-metal. They have properties of both. So, just make sure you can point those out. So let me get rid of this and let's look at some of the groups. So group 1A, so that is the first column. those are your alkali metals, right? So these are very reactive metals, as I have here. So reactive that it's very hard to find these metals not already reacted with something in nature, right? You're never going to find a brick of sodium laying around naturally. It's going to be like in table salt. And group 1A, they are the first column in your periodic table, and their charge when they react, they're always going to form a +1. Right? So during chemical reactions, they lose electrons. Remember, for atoms, we don't trade protons. We don't gain or lose protons. We gain or lose electrons. So here we must lose 1 electron. Next column over are your alkaline earth metals. They are reactive, but not as much as your alkali metals. For us, they are the second column, so they have a +2 charge. If you notice, Be is actually not here. That's because it's an outlier. Be can have different charges, but we are just going to say for right now, if you're in the second column, you're going to have a +2 charge. The next group we are going to look at is all the way over the right, 7A or group 17. These are your halogens, right? So FCl, Bri are what we consider the halogens. These are gases at room temperature. Very reactive. Again, you're never going to find chlorine or fluorine gas just hanging out in nature. They're going to be reacted with something. And here on the right-hand side of the periodic table, you're usually going to be negative, right? So this side usually negatively charged, the other side usually positively charged. And so your halogens, during a reaction, they will gain 1 electron. So they become -1. You can ignore this H minus. That does happen, but not often. So your halogens will be -1. Just an interesting little thing. Sodium, poisonous. Chlorine, poisonous. You mix them together, you get salt, which is very not poisonous. We need salt in some amounts. So it's just interesting how actual chemistry works there. Your group 8, so the very last column on the periodic table, 8A or 18, are your noble gases. And the reason they're called noble is because they don't react with anything. You know, just how like noble monarchy people would not react with or interact with regular people like you and me, the noble gases don't react with anything else. So yeah, we do find neon just hanging out in the world. We do find helium, argon, and then go to Vegas, you're going to find a lot of neon in those lights. Noble gases, since they don't react, they won't form a charge. They won't form an ion. Right, let's just look at some of these other charges though. So if you're group 6A, so if you're right next to the halogens, you are going to form an anion. You're going to be -2 in reactions for the most part. So from oxygen all the way to Te, these elements in a reaction will be -2. Nitrogen, when it forms a reaction, usually -3. This one, in my experience, actually is not always -3, but a lot of times it will be. And then aluminum +3. So aluminum's just hanging out here, right? So what I want you to know from this, make sure you know those groups. So if I say in class halogen, alkali metal, you should know what I'm talking about on the periodic table. You should know their general reactivities. 1, very reactive. 7A, very reactive. 2A, reactive, not as much as the other two. Noble gas is not reactive. And you should also know the charges of these atoms in reactions. This is actually going to be very critical when we talk about how to name molecules. So get it down now because this concept will be coming back. So if you don't understand it now, if you don't have this stuff like memorized, when we get to naming compounds, it's going to be very difficult for you. All right, to test yourself out, I have some questions. So like I said at the beginning, when we do this, please pause because I'm gonna jump right into the answers. And as always, you need to try to answer, try to stretch your mind to learn things. All right, so what is the charge of the F ion? That will be F minus, it's a halogen. And halogens are non-metals. Right, moving on. K, potassium. So potassium is going to form a +1 charge. Potassium is metal. This is a alkali metal. It's group 1. All right. Neon. What is the charge of a neon ion? Well, neon doesn't form ion, so neutral. What type of atom is neon? That's a nonmetal. Again, everything on the right, non-metal, anything on the left, metal. What class of atom is neon? That's a noble gas. And then lastly, we have magnesium here. So I'll give the answer in about 5 seconds here. So magnesium is in group 2. So that's 2+. It's on the left-hand side, so it's a metal. This is an alkaline earth metal. So when it comes to test 1, you might see problems like this. I will give you a periodic table, so you don't have to memorize everything in those columns. You do have to memorize, 1, 2, 17, 18, alkaline metals, alkaline earth metals, halogens, noble gases. Also, you should be able to tell me for the elements we talked about on the previous slide, what kind of charge are they going to have in a chemical reaction? Oh, I have one more. So oxygen. What is the charge of oxygen? That will be -2. Oxygen is a non-metal. It's on the right-hand side. What class of oxygen? Not given. All right, we didn't talk about that. So if it's an element that I don't give you that falls outside, we're not going to worry about like what is the name of those elements. Only the 4 I talked about. All right, so that's actually a very short lecture because we did cover some of it on Wednesday. On Monday, we are going to get into some heavy math, some big concepts. So that's why I'm not doing it in the video. I want to be there for any questions and to walk you through this math. But thank you for taking a little bit time out of your day to watch this video. And I also put up homework. So there's Pearson homework for what we just talked about here already up. But yeah, if you have any questions about what we talked about or anything at all, feel free to email me. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday. Have a good weekend, everybody.